Hello. I'll start with a bit of context about Toy Dog. It was the first adventure into slap bass, which ended up being prominent, or at least featured on every song on By Now. There is slap bass on every single song, and that was the little challenge that I set for myself, making the record, to have slap bass on every single song on the album. The name Toy Dog, the original name was 23 M1 Bliss, because it was the 23rd session in 2014. So I number sessions yearly, and M1, the Korg M1 plugin that will feature prominently throughout everything I'm doing here. This little plugin from a recreation of the 90s Korg wavetable synthesizer that's literally on every track. So yeah, I wrote it. The original title was Showbiz. There's this sense with all the shuffle. I'll put a little drum track on here with have a little bit of shuffle in there. It has this kind of razzle dazzle, like swing time feel to it, and I think that gives it a little bit of a sort of I'll get esoteric, a little bit of a sort of cabaret, like tap dancey, jazz hands kind of ta-da, jazzy thing underneath these straight beats. There's a little bit of shuffle. So yeah, the original name for By Now was going to be Showbiz, because that's a bit of an in-joke that we have in the small social circle of musicians I know in New Zealand making this sort of stuff. We tend to call everything showbiz. It's just a bit of a talking big, like you're a Hollywood bigwig, even though you're playing shows in people's lounges and stuff, and that's kind of the joke. But showbiz was the the original sort of mission statement for the album. So that ended up, the song title ended up being reused for another track called Showbiz, and then the album was called By Now, after I was looking at an Amazon page or something like that, and I saw the button saying By Now, so we could sort of do a little bit of a détournement on the phrase of By Now, and remind people of the record every time they look up e-commerce. It was the first song I wrote in front of my little dog Ralph, who I will put a picture of in front of the screencast now. My partner Chloe got him as a graduation present from Whitireia Jewellery School. When she graduated, she got this little dog Ralphie, and it was a bit of a adjustment period to writing music in the same room as him. Like, I didn't know, because he was a little puppy. I didn't really want to get on his nerves by aggravating a dog's sort of sensitive hearing by repeatedly blasting the same music all day. So I was conscious of him in the room, and of course he is a toy dog. So the miniature pincher is the king of toys, as a sort of tribute song to him, and you can also see him in the By Now video that we made for YouTube, which should be included in the materials for this album. So yeah, it's a little tribute to my dog. It's a little bit of a sort of tap dancey showbiz, razzle dazzle, wow kind of cheeky little tune. Yeah. So the slap bass thing as well. I was watching a lot of Seinfeld, even though it's a Kurzweil sampler in the Seinfeld original soundtrack. There is this bass patch which has a velocity layering, allows you to pop and then slap. There's also a thump, but I take the thump out because the thump something that we imply with percussion instruments instead of the bass track. So yeah, there's a little background on Toy Dog. I spent a lot of time listening to it on the way to work when I was cutting glass at my dad's glass business in Lower Hutt, when it was going. So I would work on it all night and then wake up, rush to work, and be listening to the demos on the way to work. So it's all quite seems all quite idyllic sort of period. So yeah, without further ado, here's more on Toy Dog. Okay, here we have the session for Toy Dog, which is all MIDI goodness. Here we go. Let's have a little look. The whole thing's built around this chord progression from this little thingo called chord space, which takes a little bit to come up. Let's just do a little admin there, this, that. This is a freeware MIDI generator that someone put out. It's still available for Windows 32-bit VST. I know this chord's in it. It's kind of home chord, but I don't know what I did in the end to come up with what you will hear now, this part. It's a tight little chord progression of tetrachords, jazz chords, whatever you might call it. The computer thinks it's D major 7, E minor 7, B minor 7. A lot of these tracks on the album tend to have this little trick where it's a really dense chord progression. A dense chord progression underneath a very simple melody. That's generally the prescription for the whole track. Anyway, so that was, we can go back to the original session, but that's the initial Eben's Cookbook recipe of it. Underneath we have a bass line that jumps around the different scale degrees, though not necessarily fitting. I'm looking at that pad sound and the bass sound together. Anyway, you'll hear it now. So we get that. In between we have this, oh, we've opened two bass lines at once. Let's open this single one. This is the slap bass. Strong theme on the record is slap bass on the strong beats on beats 2 and 4. So you hear this kind of effect that would normally be driven by the snare, being driven on the bass line. And it's quiet in the mix until it shows up a bit later on. We can just solo off the snare and then you'll hear it. Of course, there's a little pedal at the end of the bar to give it a push over the edge every time. Just give it a little boop. Anyway. The hook is a Korg M1 preset called Doot Dit. It's all over the patch selection in By Now. There's a lot of this preset, and I'm actually using it in a cartoon scoring thing right now in 2020. It's a great patch. It's one of my favorites. Underneath that is also a sample of my own voice, which I use to just sort of fill out the sound, make it a bit more sort of generalized, hybridized. That's the root note there. So we've got both of these little beasties This patch I added in a bit later on, but that becomes relevant in a little bit on a fill. It's a surprise tool that will help us later on in the piece. So then, after the hook, we have this nice little part of slap bass, which comes up to the 4, hopefully with a bit of velocity. If I remember correctly, the MIDI notes are stronger. No, they're just the same. It's just... Where are we looking? Oh no, they are stronger. We'll come back a bit. Back to where we just were. And as you can see on the velocity zoning, wherever it is, we're hitting the hard notes. Underneath that is a kind of chunky version of the same chord progression, but just solo this off. This is giving a kind of complex rhythm to a simple chord progression by jumping octaves, but because it's in tetrachords, you can kind of, or whatever you call these 4-note chords, it kind of sounds ambiguous. So it's just 2 chords. Is it? It's 3 chords. So if we flatten it all out, it'll sound like this. What you're hearing there is a bug with Chord Game 1. If you trigger the same chord straight after the other, it'll cut it off. But we don't have to worry about that, because what actually happens in the song is this. I really like this effect. It goes kind of chunky and sets you up for that next drum fill coming. This is the kind of curtain raising bit. It's like, welcome to the show. In the fill. The hi-hats get a little doubled up at the end. It's a bit of a kind of rock drumming cliche to kind of like this AC/DC back in black backbeat kind of whatever it is. We're back to the hook. So we were talking about this pad sound, which I'll solo off again. This kind of has these harmonics that kind of sound to me like a tape stop, it's like a harmonic series that's kind of getting sort of glooped down. So I actually took the idea from this pad sound and turned it into a tape reverse sort of DJ backspin effect. At the end of this fill, which should all make sense. And when I play it live, I can do a little spin on the dance floor. So it's quite a nice effect to get to this middle 8 kind of chill section, but I mean all of it's a chill section, but yeah, I like this kind of sonic parallel between this pad sound and this this kind of backspin. And all this automation, there's all this admin here, because during the backspin, you really don't want any other stuff coming through. A lot of the grouping and the automation and stuff is just to cut out the sections of audio coming through, so the backspin goes over the top. And we can still edit all of this drums and stuff. Otherwise, I'd have to print it to audio and cut it out. Would be a bit of a nightmare to handle while I'm trying to edit. And I always keep the MIDI as far as I can go, going to audio as a last resort, except when you got to do a backspin. So that's just a render of the song that's been pitch enveloped. I think of that section, but then reversed, like, a palindrome. This is where the thumps shine and slap and thump the bass line patch. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, these slow thumps. Oh, did I turn them off for this version? I might have remapped the patch. Anyway, I'm trying to use this sort of slap. Just a little bit more, kind of give it a bit more juice. With a pitch bend. So the bass goes for a walk, and then it kind of meets up. It meets up with the doos. The doos are like, hey. Then they're like, hey, yeah, cool. And then more of these things kind of meet. This kind of piano stab. This is a kind of way of doing, we'll go back through it, but kind of terracing up the dynamic in terms of, it doesn't get more compositionally complex at all, it just gets more busy. You just keep chucking more stuff into the pot. So you've got more beats that are sort of accentuated. But then the compositional elements actually sort of slow down compared to the rest of the stuff in the tune. When I play this live, I do these magic, like kind of magic show moves, where I'm flicking around, pretending to pull rabbits out of hats and stuff. It's got that kind of slow beat, and you have this sort of moving focal point between these different levels of pulse. It starts out with the slap bass being kind of offbeat, and then ending at bars. The end of the bar, it gives you a little do-do-do. Then this piano stab accentuates beat 2. Anyway, pretty simple stuff, you get it. So this little fill here that ends this little chill section comes back in a kind of crashing way that I came up with. We'll get into that. But this kind of run where it goes doodly-doo-doo. And not traditionally in dance music, you don't really have these sorts of like pop rock style like pedal elements that push at the end of a phrase. They tend to mark time too strongly in my experience, but writing this sort of stuff in electronic music is pretty rewarding, I think. So this fill, that fill comes back halfway through the measure. So this one in solo, it's got a strong left-right component in the stereo field, so it goes. You've got two brass sounds that swap channels in left and right space, and then they kind of crash together in the mono. I wouldn't normally cut automation that fast, but it tends to work with the punchiness of the song. So you have this underneath this little fill part in the bass, you have this kind of slightly disoriented chord run that pushes the bar at the end. And that's kind of reprised by this little bit that kind of yanks up its ankle. It goes like just more hook, and then back to the meat and potatoes. Except at the end of every 2 bars here, I do this kind of doodle-doo-doo thing on the bass, and then later on in another couple of instruments to just keep the end of those 2 bar sections sort of running along. These are kind of just the little winks. This is winky stuff. Chuck a fill in there, just be a little spontaneous, be kind of up for it. So we end on a gag. Of course, gags all the way through, but like this kind of low do, I really like it, just how it kind of goes. It goes do. So it's just doubled up from the do. It's a cheap way of just adding a bit of reverb at the end, just to double up the sampler. Because we're digital, it doesn't matter how much room we're taking up. And this one has reverb on it. So we have the lead instrument sort of reprising the lower notes of the tight chord progression that I initially started with there. That's the time of it. That's what happens over time. A lot of the punchy effects have this kind of black market version of a Fruity Loops plugin called Sound Goodizer. They released a really weird sort of Google Google Pages version of the site for this VST version of Sound Goodizer. They've called it You Are Shock, which is Fist of the North Star anime reference from the theme tune. Anyway, this tends to chunk up. This is like a multi-band maximizer with 4 presets and 1 knob. It's kind of a bit of a joke in producer circles, but it'll give a lot of the backspins chunky for it. Is it without? That's it with. Here's it without. So it just gives you a bit more top end and kind of the Fletcher Munson loudness, kind of bass and treble type stuff. We'll get into the drums later because they are on a multi-track down here. These are the individual channels for the drum sampler. Middle bass. Guitar rig ensemble. It's also got the gate on it, which is probably giving us a bit of interplay with the dynamics, maybe. And then ozone for the visual EQ, and a little bit of excitation on the top end, just to give us a bit of sizzle. It's much fuller without it, but then might not fit in the mix. But yeah, to give it kind of crisp, sort of pocketed sound. And this ensemble effect is basically a generic chorus, vintage style chorus. Slap and Thump has a little bit of parallel distortion on it, a little bit of drive through PSP Vintage Warmer, and then this is probably just some EQ. Very drastic EQ. I wouldn't EQ that much these days, but that's me. I've learned. It's interesting to see how this stuff stacks up in terms of EQ. It's very strange. This pad sound has the maximizer on it, a chorus. This is Nuendo Factory Chorus. This is just from, comes with the software, with Nuendo 4, and probably Ozone on the little bit of mid-side EQ just to take out the some of the side frequencies in the mids. This one's just trying to be a bit chunky, I think. Without it, it's probably going to be a bit flat. Oh, it's wide, but if we have this stuff on there, it's a bit more sort of bit more punchy. Wave picks, that's the similar pad sound, similar stuff going on, clipping to push up the crust a bit. Sonic Maximizer, I don't know what this, we're on a demo version here, I don't think this is ever used in the sessions. I think I disabled all the instances of it. Bit of reverb. Doot Dit has just straight up and down going to into the lead group, which probably has a lot more stuff going into it. Yeah, the lead group, which is contains the sample do from myself and the Doot Dit. They are combined into a group, so they're processed together. A little bit of parallel distortion and a little bit of EQ. It's a bit of a mid-side to just take out. I'm assuming the top of side and some of the mid. Then moving right along, we have sample do end. That's, we've talked about that. That's got this little do with Roomworks. That's a stock Nuendo 4 plugin. And Nightshine compressor, which is a clone of an Alesis 3630. That's a little freeware compressor. It was pretty good. I got obsessed with this compressor for ages, and then realized it was coloring everything too much, so I've moved on to Tokyo Dawn Kotelnikov. These pads, I think this section might be no. Let me just do a little admin here. There is some side chaining involved here, which we will find somewhere, but we'll keep looking on a track by track basis. Just some EQ on that. Mystics to top end to just fill out that stuff from Two Voices 01 above it. And this one probably, yep, guitar rig ensemble as always. So just a bit of chorus. Then these piano stabs from the middle 8 bit. Pitch bend that isn't actually doing anything. Cool. I probably copied a chord progression from there. This one has a reverb send, not a reverb insert. This one's disabled. So that's parallel distortion, little mid-side EQ. I was really obsessed with keeping the top end really mellow, but I don't do that these days. And this one has a little widening on the upper mids. Yeah, this reverb to ascend its waves reverb. Barely use it with some parallel distortion on it. Yeah, I got obsessed with parallel distortion all over this record to try to make the fidelity a bit less crisp, a bit more kind of chunked up. The idea is that you distort something and then you add in the distorted effect over the dry signal, so you get a lot of chunk on top of what you've actually got. It's totally straight. So you're just adding a layer of dirt on top of it. And just a little bit of mid-side to get the frequencies going right for the reverb. Yeah, so these ones are being bussed to a what's scene 1. This one's going out to a throw brass. That's right. There's an effects channel with a reverb and a compressor on it. That's Reverb and Nightshine. the 360 clone and reverb, which I got obsessed with on this record, to throw that last note. So you have this, you have the dinner, which is dry, and then the dinner is like super, super wet. So you have just the one tail of the two last chords rather than the start chords as well, just to keep the keep the reverb tail really strongly in that harmony for the mix. Okay, and drum channels, which are probably going to be organized a little bit strangely because this drum sampler, even though it's my favorite, is a bit annoying to do admin in. Track 0, I believe, is the clap and the rim shot, which is nothing that we're hearing at the moment. Just hunt for the right region. We got claps. Where are claps? Yeah, they're pretty quiet. So clapped and rim shot, they never appear twice, so that's why they're being put together in one stem. And that, for this song, they occupy the same sort of sonic qualities. So the clap and rim sounds are just reverb and a bit of compression. Everything's compressed and reverbed just slightly, then drastically EQ'd, then destroyed by EQ. But I guess this is a clap and a rim shot, so it doesn't really matter with that low end. I think with the drums I was looking for like a heavily windowed kind of like kickers in the bass, snares in the low mids, claps and cymbals are in the top, and getting everything pocketed, that kind of style of drum mixing. Anyway, the snare, completely dry track going into a group and a bus. Yeah, that's right. So the audio comes out of REMO 1 and into snare group, and also comes out of snare, goes through snare reverb and into snare group, so we can change the level of the snare channel. And with it change the level of the reverb. So we set the relative reverb level with one fader, and we set the absolute value of both of them with this fader. So snare reverb is just wave reverb. That's probably the default preset. It's fine. Kick. Now this is going through Nightshine compressor into probably just EQ that's actually bypassed, so it's not doing anything. There we go. Add a little bit of something extra. And then the kick drum group has another compressor over it, and this one has the sidechain send for Mystics. I don't know why. No, that's actually off. So I did set up, that's right, on the kick channel I did set up a sidechaining thing that didn't work out. So it was like controlling the compression of the pads on the kick drum to give it that kind of stylish, like chill wavy sort of heavily compressed thing, to compress the pad sounds on the beat as the kick comes in. But we didn't go with that in the end because it sounds a bit silly on this stuff. Right, where were we? We were on the kick. Okay, moving on, we have channel 3, which is probably hi-hats, yes. Hi-hats has reverb through overdrive, and the overdrive is set to 100%. It's NDA overdrive, which is like he's a freeware developer, put out a suite of plugins that I've used since probably like 2003. Yeah, just sort of generic stuff, and it's got no GUI, just the straight parameter view like we used to back in the good old days. So yeah, the hi-hats and cymbal channel is, I'm going for like a real rock thing there. These kind of like mid-heavy, like smashed room. And then the rest of the drum channels, this is toms, but they only come through on 1 or 2 fills. I think they're just standard like Lindrum toms. Where are ye toms? Barely imperceptible. Barely perceptible. Yeah, so horrible gated reverb sound through reverb, which is probably, it's got the gate on it. Yeah, so there's a gated kind of reverb. We just loop these. Find the spot again. There it goes. Where were we? We're here. Yeah, so it's reverb's internal 1/8 length gate. It uses VST timing to give you the, it knows what an eighth note, how long it is. So the gate time corresponds accordingly with the tempo. And then good old fashioned Nightshine compressor. And then the rest of the drum channels are unallocated in this song. We only go up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're only using the first 5 channels. So these two, not used at all. Then we got a bunch of group tracks. Drum track. Drums main goes into drums VCA because I thought it would be a good idea to be able to control the level of the drums after the group track, but then the group track does nothing, so it's kind of redundant. Drum Room had Freeverb 2 on it. The backup plugin that I was using that was the same as JB Omniverb, I couldn't get Freeverb 2 going on this machine. Either way, the drum reverb track is so quiet. It's basically there for sort of glue type thing. Drum Sub was set up to do this compression thing. So there's a lot of groups that just run through that don't do anything at all. And then with the occasional bit of EQ just chucked on them just to be ever so annoying. So let's just keep EQing the drums through group channels. The kick group is Nightshine again. Basses is a group channel that hasn't been used for anything. For some reason I thought it was maybe a good idea to mold them through Waves L2 and then Sonic Maximizer, which isn't running at the moment. Yeah, it should have been pulled out of the session, but hey, we'll keep it in. Pads channel, that's just for volume automation to control the level of all the pads. That's just kind of admin, there's no processing happening there. Leads. Leads have parallel distortion. And then a little EQ, bit of mid-side just to sculpt it out in the stereo field. Right. Big pad is probably this stuff here, given that it's a big pad. There's the maximizer again, running full. The sound of sort of two competing elements through a maximizer is something that I really love, and it's something that I really explored on this record. That you run two dense sounds at sort of competing volume levels through a maximizer, which will attempt to sort of equalize out the volumes, and then you have this nice sort of chunky interplay when the second voice comes in. it's good for that part, because this part sort of the oxygens get sucked out of the room for a second, and it's like, hey, where are we going? And then you get back into the hook. Slap bass VCA is probably just that's just volume admin. Wide trumpets break will be to control the level of this break. And that's just to combine them all together. Have I used any? No, I haven't used any panning effects to change the stereo field. No widening on that. Though I could have, and maybe I should have. Group 11 does not exist. It's an extra group that is in the session. Then did we have any temporary mastering stuff? No, did we? No, that's just basically flattening EQ and loudness maximizing on the master channel, just to listen back with it with a bit more chunk. Yeah, so that's Toy Dog. That's the full Cliff's Notes on Toy Dog.